All right, here we are for another episode of Life with Jerry. So here we go. So, Jerry, I want to talk a little bit more about family members today because, a lot of them, I didn't know that well, but so you talk, we're about in the middle of the book now in terms of questions. And you spoke about a trip that you took to Tucson where Lenny and Sonny lived.
Right, for health reasons.
I remember, I remember playing racquetball with Lenny on a number of occasions when they lived in California. And,
Yeah.
my recollection is they were really good people. So what are your remembrances of them from your youth through your adulthood?
Well, first of all, they had their lives and I had mine. And it wasn't like we saw them every week or every month. The main thing I got out of the relationship was respect for Lenny, who was both honest and straight, and his wife, very, very informed, and with it. And so I enjoyed being with them because they weren't yes people. They were people who had opinions, but also who had given thoughts. And frankly, our views agreed, so that helped in terms of a relationship. And they had three nice kids. And I have one picture from the trip we took to Tucson of the five of them. So, maybe I can get it to you. Who knows?
What do you,
Hello? Yeah.
when you think of, why did they move to Arizona? What was Lenny's health issues?
Lenny his father was a plumber, and he got into the plumbing union, which meant you could make a very good living. But if you think of plumbing and all, a lot of it is outdoors, and a lot of it would be during the winter. And he reached that point where he could not function. I mean, the weather was too much. They moved to Tucson, I guess a recommendation from someone. But he started to teach. And when he wasn't teaching political science or French, he was teaching plumbing. And so that helped him. Even in Tucson, it can get cold. So, and then ultimately, they moved to California, the Valley, because that really was, you're a good wife. That was a good, was better for him. And, I was thinking of this interview and others and how one family really drew people from six families because of the, marriages, et cetera, et cetera. And I was thinking how literally most of them, how to put it, became professionals. And I wondered why. Not everyone, but certainly a higher proportion than one would expect from an average family. So, excuse me, just commenting on Lenny, I was thinking of Lenny's son became a plumber. And then at night he went to law school. And now that he's a lawyer, has a good practice, does a lot of criminal work. His daughter, Vicky, did two things. One, she sold insurance and became the star of this agency. And that's a professional. And she also became a chef. And So on weekends, to make more money, she had a catering business. And I can go through the family, and a lot of them are professionals or the next generation. And I thought that not strange, but interesting. Why? Perhaps, you could say, well, it was a Jewish strain and they encourage reading. I think they encourage ambition, and literally every one of them in one generation went to public colleges, but their kids went to better colleges. It's just an interesting thing to, that you could explore. I don't mean you, but why they all turn professional at a certain point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of it does have to do, I think, with, with Louis and Miriam and coming to the U.S. and immigrants and really pushing, their kids. And then, it
Right.
just kind of continues. You can look at Chinese immigrants, right? Or
I think it's spread out.
Yeah.
It isn't, a lot of it is dreams on the part of the parents that, okay, we may not be a lawyer, but our daughter or our granddaughter will go to Harvard.
Isn't that part of the promise of the United States too?
That truly is.
Right. That's why.
Is the ability to move up in class. And without belaboring it, disproportionately, there's a lot of Jews in high circles or in the media. And I think it's a function of the grandparents, immigrants coming over, and very ambitious, working hard, moving up in the next generation, and then finally the third generation breaking out.
Yeah.
And that, I think you're right when you mentioned the Indian population, certainly the Japanese population. I mean, during this crisis of the virus, a lot of people have been spokesmen for medical, and so many of them are Indian. It's really impressive. Really impressive.
Yeah, no, when I lived in Durham, and I belonged to this meditation group, and most of the people were Indians, and many of them had come over. So they were first generation immigrants, and all professionals working IBM or this or that.
Right.
And then their kids, I've met a number of them. I mean, incredibly smart, even the youngest.
Yeah. No question.
But then, the kids that were college age, so I know of one, and she's going to go to medical school, so it's something about the immigrants and pushing, but it's about the environment in the US too, I think, which gives people that opportunity.
Go ahead, please.
As opposed to, when I lived in India and Nepal, and, the caste system is very much alive, and it's a whole different thing to break out of your caste. That's for sure.
It's a funny thing. I was going to talk about something of what you said, but TCM, Turner Classic Movies.
Yeah.
When they need filler, they put in some old English films where everyone wears a tuxedo. And the caste system there, there's a royalty in England, and they feed each other. Now, is that still true? I'll bet there's elements of it that are true. I don't know.
Well, everywhere. I mean, even in the US, there's somewhat of a caste system, at least, what I can see.
Yeah.
I was recently watching Gone with the Wind, and
right.
The woman who plays the Mammy, is it?
Addie McDonald.
Yeah.
McDonald. Yeah.
I was reading something about that, and the article I read said, well, she won an Academy Award, but this was the only part that there was available for someone who was, an African American, whereas she probably could have done so much more, but okay. So
in today's paper, the Times,
a
black guy college graduate who was in the mess hall or whatever the heck it's called. And when Pearl Harbor hit, he raced across to the where the captain and the wheel is and all.
Yeah.
The captain was dying. There was no one else. He maneuvered the boat. He also did some other historic things. He carried people off. And they wouldn't, everyone who was an officer during that period got a Medal of Honor. He didn't.
Yeah, that's right.
So racism is still here, and the election is one proof of it.
Yeah. Let's let's bring us back. What I remember, Lenny, I think was one leg shorter than the other, or did he have an injury?
Yeah.
What was that?
Yeah. I don't know much about. In fact, I know nothing about it.
Okay.
How he limped, but he got into the military and then he was out of it. But I don't know.
Yeah.
What it might have been infantile paralysis. It might have been one of those diseases. Don't forget, they were not cured until Salk and Sabin came along,
right,
which was considerable years later.
Yeah. I remember him as a damn good racquetball player. He used to take me to task all the time.
I think that's funny.
That's
he didn't want to let the problem inhibit him.
Yeah.
I'm sure at times it must have hurt or whatever, but he tried, and his wife was very good looking and very smart.
Yeah.
So what the heck?
Yeah, she was. I really loved them a lot. They're really good people. And I hadn't made the connection before, but Lenny had somewhat of a disability, and now I'm working with people with disability. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah,
I hadn't thought about it at all. It's a very good point.
So let's talk about Sis and Harry now, because I remember them as really nice, loving people too. And I remember spending one evening, a magical evening when I was 21 or so at their home. It was lovely, but I didn't know that much about them. So can you tell me a little bit about your memories of them?
Well, Harry, as I think I mentioned, was in this army troop that landed D-Day 2. So really in the midst of a lot of craziness. And he never was furloughed until they reached right next to Berlin, which was as far as the American troops went, a little past. And he had and the way they discharged people was on how many days in action or something. So he had all of these points that he accumulated, and he was finally furloughed. Before I say that, he was one of the people, but there were many, who liberated a concentration camp. So he always was aware of that. Anyway, he had all these points accumulated. He came home, and his brother, I think, was in the Navy. And they started a garbage collection business. And, they didn't need that much. They needed a certain amount of capital, I guess, but not. Anyway, it didn't make it. It failed. And he needed a job. He had 3 young children. So he went to work for my father. Sometimes the relationship was good, sometimes not. But Harry was in charge of shipping. And in those days, there was no FedEx. There was a UPS and the Postal Service. But you really had to be, on your toes and have to know how, different rates and things and all of that. And that's what he did for the next 40 years. Sis was a nurse and married Harry. And she was as sweet as they come. She was just terrific. They had 2 daughters, Betty Lee, and They had two daughters. And they did well. This is that thing again. Nadine married this guy, and she started a business with flowers and in the mail. Betty Lee went to work in a hospital, and she's retiring now. She was an administrator for the whole hospital. So you come from, garbage man, sending out packages, to your daughter is in charge of administration for the hospital. And Nadine also is retiring. She subsequently did some stuff. So, I mean, it's a great story. It's America.
It's America.
You really can grow.
That's right.
Yeah. And just for the moment, Nadine's, Betty, let me get it straight. Doesn't matter. One of them's daughter is a lawyer.
Yeah, Nadine's.
No, Kim. Kim is the lawyer. Yeah. Yeah. So from, and then you look at your generation, you look at Mark and Andrew and Wendy, and somehow they all got professional jobs and did well, responsible, passed it on to their kids. Great story.
That's right. Yeah. It's going to keep going.
Yeah.
So here's we talked a little bit about this last time, but so you had bought a Baskin Robbins franchise.
Right.
How many other businesses were you involved with, and why did you, kind of take on other businesses?
Well, the Baskin Robbins came from when we went out to visit Lenny and Sonny. They told us about this new ice cream store where the people were lining up, and it was 48 flavors or whatever it was. And so we went there, and I tried it, and I said, it's not hard. Maybe you have to know how to make ice cream, although they may have delivered it to the store. And I told Saul about it, and Joe, and we bought it. And it became the largest grossing Baskin Robbins in the United States. But I think in part it was because it was New York, and people in New York try things. And it was a good product, very good. And then Saul's went in with us. So we were partners and all. And Saul's son had a lot of problems mentally, physically. And so we put him to work in the store. And there were nights he would sleep in the store, but gradually he came out of it. And Saul bought him a store in Westchester, which became the highest grossing in New York again. But the interesting part was he became involved in a cult.
Oh.
And he went to Nepal.
Oh.
And he used to go there every year for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And that plus he did some other things in conjunction with the cult. And that's it.
Huh.
His two sisters, on the other hand, one was retarded, but I liked her a lot, Libby. And the third was a daughter named Dorothy, who married a guy named Joe, who I liked a lot. Pure wise guy, but a great, on the way home to the United States when he was discharged, he earned 10 grand in poker games. And you have to say, if it was 10 grand in 1945, it's probably the equivalent of 100. And with that, he opened a bar and restaurant in Brooklyn. And from there, he opened a restaurant and bar in Florida, gave up and sold the other restaurant. So people do, all kinds of things.
That's unbelievable. Wow.
Yeah. His name is Paul. And again, I'll give you the number and you can talk to him.
Yeah.
He may not call it a cult.
It's worth 145,000 today.
Say that again.
The 10,000 that he won then.
Could be 140. It was 1945.
Yeah, I just looked it up. 145,000.
14 times as much.
Unbelievable.
He came home loaded. Yeah, I liked him a lot. I didn't know for money,
right?
But he just was a good guy. He very strong looking and tough, and I just enjoyed talking to him.
What were some of the other businesses that you?
Yeah.
What else did
well, of course, we opened a group facility, 2 of them in Chicago and New York. We had 2 telephone centers, one in Westchester. What was the other one? The other one eventually was in North Carolina because the gal we wanted to run it, her mother was in North Carolina. So we opened a center 10 miles from her mother. What else did we do? Well, we opened another research firm called Central CLT, and they did very well. And then they broke off from us. They bought their way out. I think we did some other things, but 5 or 6 businesses, maybe more. And of course, we, as I think I mentioned the last one meeting, we had 6 offices, 7 offices around the country, and relationships, as I said, to people in Japan and China and Argentina, Brazil, obviously France, England, and Germany. And then we had offices in Florida. So we had to keep tabs, and that's what I did every Friday. Just call people, how you doing, what you doing, what's happening. We're trying this technique, and then periodically we would bring everyone in, just to. They didn't all know each other, but then they did.
So I want to go back to family now a bit.
Yeah.
I don't, in the book you mentioned, you'll have to tell me the relationship because I don't really know, but Maurice Trumer, is it?
Yeah. He was a friend of Dad's. He wasn't my friend.
Oh, he was a friend, not a relative.
Trumer? I don't think he was a relative.
Okay.
I think he was a good friend of Dad.
So he knew him though, where?
Well, he probably knew him in, I would imagine that most of his friends he knew from the town in Europe. Yeah. So that team. But I'm trying to think what Truman did. He had about 6, 7 really solid friends. Okay. One of them was a dopey, but he would work with him. And the others, were first generation who would come over. I know one was a waiter and one was a beauty parlor salon that he owned. That was Danny. And Sam worked in the garment center. So, he had his clique of friends, good guys, for the most part, but they were really among themselves. And I was a young kid, so I mean, I would say hello,
Okay.
things like that.
Okay.
And as I said, on Sundays, a number of them would come over and do all kinds of things. And then Bella would have cooked and they all ate. And then she would play the piano, you know, and play the popular songs of the day of Irving Berlin, for instance. And then they would leave and she would do the puzzles. She was a big puzzle person. And
I remember.
And she would do them fast.
Do you remember her voice at all when she sang? Did she have a good voice? Do you remember? Or
No.
no? Okay.
I mean, you know, people were just standing around the piano and singing, or some were sitting on a sofa and just singing. It's like if you were in a group, it isn't important that you hit the right C, you know. Right. It's just important that you all sing and do.
Yeah.
And then there was gossip, like every group, and you know what's doing, and all of, if you will, living.
That's right.
You know, they were living. None of them were wealthy. One guy worked for immigration department, so he was closer to being a professional than the rest. But that was it. He lived on the block.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to switch gears a little bit here.
Okay.
In the book, you talk almost close to page 400. You talk about politics, and you say, say liberals, conservatives, globalization, meritocracy, the forgotten ones. So this is a broad question, and given that Biden is our new president, I mean, where does this all kind of go from here? I mean, what do you see happening then?
Well, in part, it depends on whether Biden can pull some things off, which is to trade things. For instance, we need, what do you call it? We need to fix our infrastructure all over the country. Bridges are falling down, tunnels, roads. I think the Republicans have to agree if Biden says, why don't we put together a package? It'll be good for the rural area. We'll be able to create millions of jobs. It's like in the 30s where they created jobs to fix parks and, and lakes and et cetera. So I think that's something he could get them to agree on. He's been in the Senate a long time, so have a lot of them. And I don't think they perceive him as the enemy. But that's one thing. Another thing is how he attacks the virus. The logic is to close down half the country, and then the other half. If we can convince the people who think it's just a boondoggle and it's not freedom, and what if he just took half the country and closed down for a month? And if we can demonstrate that the virus was diminishing, and I'm making this up as you and I are talking, maybe the other half of the country would go along. The Idahos and North Dakotas, South Dakotas, Colorado, and et cetera, et cetera. There's something about winning in Georgia. You would think it impossible. Yeah. So if they can win in Georgia, then maybe Biden can talk to the people in Georgia, and instead of blue or red, it's purple. I don't think we can do anything with Mississippi or West Virginia or Alabama, parts of these, because frankly, it's a racial thing. You know what I mean? There's a movie with Montgomery, whatever his name was, about TVA, and I don't know if you saw it, where he's an agent, he's going into Tennessee Valley Authority, and this old woman doesn't want to leave her house, and part of it is so racial, and it's a good reminder, coming from the Civil War, we're still fighting it, and
Right.
but this time we won. But if Trump really decides to be, just an absolute, continuer of his policy of trying to keep Biden from succeeding in anything, it's going to be a very tough time. Biden will have to appeal to people all over saying, Trump had his chance, give me a chance. And I think, at least initially, for instance, I was having a fantasy in bed. On January 20th, they have State of the Union. And that's when Biden will probably speak. I don't know that he can talk about the State of the Union because he's been in, office a day. But generally, it's gotten so tough. Half the senators stand up and half don't. Half of the House stands up and half don't. If I were Biden, I would walk in the middle of the 50, the Republican part of the Senate, walk in the middle and say, I'm here to have a chance. And you're greeting me and you're greeting the United States population by sitting. Stand up. Let me see one guy stand up, one gal. I mean, should I send this idea to Biden?
Yeah.
But do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
if he could grab hold and say, what are you proving by sitting? That you don't want change, you don't want to improve, you don't want to work with me? I want to work with you. You represent people. I want to reach out to those people. Now, can he do that? Maybe I'll write him a letter, but it won't be, unless I knew someone close who could pull something like that off. I think he could pull it off.
Well,
it wouldn't kill him.
He has relationships with a number of those elected officials already, as opposed to Trump.
Well, it changes, but he has enough of a relationship. I don't know how he's going to do it, but mine is one way.
Yeah.
Is to grab people and say, let's go. Let's make the country. Now, besides infrastructure, there are other things that have to be done. We're defending Medicare and all, sure. And it should be, but that doesn't mean it couldn't be improved. And that would be a Republican issue. Don't abolish Medicare. You don't abolish Social Security. I think if they tried, the Republicans, to abolish Social Security, I think several senators would be in potential harm, because not everyone realizes what Social Security is. But if they were told that there was going to be no Social Security and it was Republicans, I think some of the Republicans would fear for their lives. It's so ingrained.
Absolutely.
So we'll see. So that's already 2-3 issues where they could agree. Have a conference of senators who come up with a new and improved, not Social Security, but Medicare. Kentucky loves it. And even though that's where McConnell is, it's one of the strongest Medicare. I don't think McConnell would bring it up because I think he'd be afraid personally for his political career first, but then for his life.
Right.
And I mean it.
It's true.
So
Very true.
now, what else could they, in foreign policy, you can rejoin the World Health Organization. You could say, I'm committed to, climate control. The Chinese, who are the worst, we're not the worst guys. I would force the Chinese to start improving. We would renew our relationship with England, France, and Germany, who are real allies. We would tell Poland, Hungary, that they're currently, what's the word? I don't know. Really, really one-party systems turning bad. I think he could turn them around. I think he could. Trump did some interesting things on Israel. He just said, screw it, we're moving the, okay, I think he gets rewarded for that. He gets merit, whatever. But there are other countries that might join with Israel. For instance, no one knows anything about Indonesia, but it's the biggest Muslim country in the world, like 200 people. We have a good relationship. Maybe they could convince them to, and they just go along with the crowd in terms of Israel. They don't really care because they're so far away and they don't have an Arab population. Maybe he can start the ball rolling there. And certainly he could do things in Africa and improve the relationships there. So on the foreign policy, what do you do about Korea? What do you do about Iran? I think Iran might welcome a relationship with the United States once Trump goes. In other words, it's faith. They can't meet with Trump. But if they then are invited, meaning the Iranians are invited to a meeting, maybe there's something there, maybe.
Yeah.
As far as Russia, I think he could tell Putin that if there are any more hackers, A, we're going to bomb the hackers, and B, we're going to do something that really will affect you. Yeah. So there are things that can be done with China.
Yeah.
They obviously are stealing our intellectual property, right, and we can do something about that. We can do something with Iran. Venezuela, they're a small country. They have one of the biggest supplies of oil. My feeling is back off. Let them resolve it. And just tell them, if you can come to some, agreement, we'll help you get back on your, on your feet. So there's plenty to do. One of the things, I read the Times every day in some detail, and you see the people that Trump appointed. It's as if they wiped out everything back to the New Deal when there was nothing, and they were first starting to do things, So it isn't only in the immigrants. They're doing it in terms of labor, and they wouldn't have a minimum wage, and that's something that a lot of people would back, the minimum wage. So there's a whole agenda, and he has to pick out the best people who will move it, and the order that it ought to be in.
That's right.
I thought Obama was wrong when he pushed medical rather than jobs. I thought that if he could have picked jobs, some of the resentment of the lower classes wouldn't have been there.
That's right.
And then building on that, he could have built, he could have gone after medical.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
I thought he went the wrong way.
Yep.
That's the way life is.
Here's there was a quote in your book from Alfred Kazin, is it?
Yeah.
In which he said,
Alfred Kazin.
Kazin.
K-A-Z-I.
That's right, from Alfred Kazin.
I knew his wife. She was a client.
Oh, well,
Nice gal.
it says,
right.
Essentially, it was the revolutionaries that he loved, not the system, but the people at their bravest. And how does that equate with your life?
I think you have to repeat it. I'm not sure in what context this was.
Sorry, I'm going to, hold on for 1 minute. Hold on. I'm going to pause. Okay, here we go. So on page 394 of your book, you say, I thought Alfred Kazin put it exactly right, really nailed it. It was not their fucking revolution I loved. It was the revolutionaries. It was not the system, but man, woman at their bravest, their most loving and their most far reaching. So how does that equate with your life?
Well, okay, now I know the context.
Yeah.
I think I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
The Communist Party in the early 1900s, and then they took over and all of that. It was like there were stars. I didn't like Trotsky's policies, but I liked Trotsky.
Yeah.
See, and I think that's an example. It wasn't that their policies were admirable or well-developed or singular or really for the people. Those things, you know, and when you read them and all, they never pulled them off, you see. But on the other hand, when you were talking of Trotsky, Zapata, et cetera, he's from Mexico, and Lenin, and a variety of others, it's like, and it's very funny. Now, I think it's a very apt time. This morning, I read the Times, and one of the articles said something to the effect of, it wasn't what Trump was doing. It was they admired Trump for doing it, you see.
Yeah.
And so the same with Trotsky, and as an example, and Roosevelt, and a number of others were doing things that really, they were the picture, what they attempted to do, and they fell short, or they gave it up, or whatever. And this article, I guess an essay in the opinion page, was saying what the Democrats had missed was that people, and he didn't do so badly, people admired him rather than the policies. They wouldn't go for some of the policies like abolishing Social Security. These people who have no money want Social, of course not. You know, they don't. The point is, he will have that aura, that charisma after he's declared it. And we don't know what he's going to do, you know. He might turn around and say, I need a year off to build up my hotels. You won't be surprised. He may say, I'm going to watch every one of the Republican senators, and anyone who votes against this, I'm going to get them in the next election. Well, they're scared. They're frightened. So we don't know what he's going to do. But what a lot of people, I was talking to one guy, I don't know, he was sitting at a table, so was I, and he was going to vote for Trump. And I said, why would you vote for Trump? I mean, if we really are straight, he doesn't give a damn about you. He doesn't care whether you eat that pastry or not, or whether you have enough money for the pastry. But there's something about him, you know, and if you remember in the 30s, we had 3 speakers who were like that. Father Coughlin was a Catholic church, priest who was on the radio every week, a priest, against Jews. We had Huey Long, who definitely was going to run for president. He might have been defeated. Roosevelt might have won. But then you could say that about Trump. He might have been defeated, but he wasn't. And this time, he got it. By the way, he could have won if he had done two simple things. One is some conciliatory message, something that's believable. He might have said, I know how hard it is for everyone to do something in medics. He said, we're going to have a 1-year hiatus of no charges for medics. Or he might have said, I agree with Biden that we ... He didn't have to believe any of it. All he had to do was to show he was human. And a number of people would have gone over. But he didn't do it. And he couldn't do it because of his own makeup. But I think if he had taken two conciliatory measures, I don't know what they are, market research would have uncovered it. If he had talked about this and that, he would have brought enough people over. Is it true? Is it accurate? Am I right? Who knows?
I'm amazed that people don't look at character. I mean, how could you vote Trump if you look at character? What?
Well,
I don't know.
It depends on your definition of character, right?
I suppose.
I mean, character is meaning standing up for people, even though, or doing something even though you know it's wrong. There's all kinds of character, but character may be, I want to help people, and these elite in Washington, really all they care about is themselves and passing laws that benefit them. That's a potent message. And the truth is, it's not quite true. West Virginia lives on US money. Without money going to West Virginia from the government, they'd starve to death. There's nothing there. The coal is gone and there's nothing else there. And yet they vote 80% for Trump.
Overwhelmingly.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And right.
Crazy.
That's tied in with race.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's whole tier of people who are, frankly, whether they admit it or not, or don't want to correct it or not, race is a big issue.
Absolutely.
And so the people who say, the people who say, the blacks are rioting and all of that. Right, you got it.
No. I want to ask you one more question today. This is
okay.
A positive note. So Sheila, the family lived in Chappaqua for a number of years. I visited.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you worked on was this Chappaqua Library. So I want you to, and one of the things that I took away from the book is you talked about after it was completed, there was this long line of people, getting books from the old library or the old part of the library to the new one, which is a great picture.
Yes.
So talk about that.
I don't have Well, I used to go to the library every week and take out a number of books. My eyes were good. And I was interested in a number of topics. And I would sit there for a few hours, an hour, 2 hours. And a librarian approached me and said, there's an opening or vacancy or whatever on the library board. And we really need somebody who really loves the library. And we think you love the library. Well, I was sitting there. So they appointed me to the library board. There was an election, I won, but there was no one else running. I mean, so I won. And there were 5 members on the board, and every year one would drop out, and you'd move up the ladder. Excuse me. And it was obvious. Excuse me. It was obvious that our library was antiquated. It's too small, no room for computers and all of the modern library tools. And so we wanted to do a plebiscite or whatever.
Yeah.
To get the money, we needed about $2.4 million to build this new library. And the plebiscite, or I'm missing the word, but was held. It had been on, the county election slate.
Yeah.
And we won, and it was it had been defeated 4 times in a row, and we won. And we then elicited some architects, and we had 2 or 3 of the best architects in the world come to the library with plans and all. And I said to myself, how could I get this experience anywhere else? It's like, I'm trying to think of, you go to a political meeting and the governor or the mayor, and there's only 6 people in the room. So he did a good job. Real estate people told us that people want to know about facilities. They want to know, is there a library? Is there an after school program? Is there whatever? And our library didn't measure up. Now we had a new library that was state of the art. And it came to the point where they were finished. So we formed a long line from the old library to the new library and passed books from one person to another. I don't have a picture. I went to the Historical Society. Maybe I'll go again and ask them if they had any pictures. And they said no, but I thought they did. It was just a fantastic day. It was about 3, 4, 5 hours. And there were people cheering on both sides. And, it was a great moment of democracy, a great moment of people banding together, getting a new one and doing. And the old library became a senior center. It wasn't that big, and so it worked.
Obviously there were people who opposed, I guess it was a bond issue maybe.
Yeah, it is. It was.
People who opposed it, but how did you convince people that, this was a really positive thing for the community?
Well, I and one other person went around to different clubs. There's a hunting club, and there's this club, and senior citizens clubs, and what else? All kinds of clubs in a small community like Chappaqua, population's 15,000. And I invited myself, and some of them obviously invited me. And I would take about 10 minutes to talk about why we needed to be advanced. There's the mercenary part, which is, I think it improves the community. But then there's the social part. We had a library, but next to it, we built a theater. And we did it in 2 pieces purposefully, because they were going to vote for one and then the other. And we said, if we lose the auditorium, it doesn't matter. We'll have the library. But both passed handily. And, I must have talked to, 15 groups. And did I convince them all? No. Some people just didn't want to pay more than a penny of taxes. But that's life, we had enough people who, looking at the facts and understanding and thinking about their property and thinking about their kids' education and the need for computers. In those days, not everyone had a computer. Right. We had a whole line of computers. Right. And they voted for it, and it passed handily.
Yeah.
And it was a great moment.
Yeah.
And I became president of the library.
Okay.
And we finished the building. And then, you know, I stepped off because that was the way it worked.
Yeah. It would be great to find a picture, I think, of it. If you could, maybe a local newspaper or something, you know?
I'm inspired. I think I'll try.
Try. Yeah, try. All right, we're going to end it there.
Okay.
When we start up next time, we're going to talk about the Spanish Revolution. Oh, boy.
Okay, that's very good.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you.